Hey everybody, good to see you back again. 1936 Caterpillar RD-6 front and center, and the paint on our engine stand build, has dried sufficiently. So we need to work on removing this large main leaf spring. And the first step in that is disconnecting this smaller equalizer spring down below, as well as the vertical links where they pin onto those bell housing brackets. I've got to pull these heavy cotter pins from the top, and this one we've taken out in pieces so far. The first two main pieces right there. We'll get this pulled the rest of the way. Oh, there we go. Do the one on the other side as well. And while we're at it, we need to take some of the tension off of these links by placing a hydraulic jack under that equalizer spring. And we will keep cranking pressure until we can freely turn that pin. That's a good sign. We can move the link, and yep, there we have it. We can freely rotate that pin. If everything is in proper order, this equalizer spring maintains tension, constant tension on these links. That's what keeps the equalizer spring seated into the saddle beneath the mainspring, but it's also what ties this whole chassis to the mainspring and prevents this front end from rearing up, because the track system geometry of these machines has the entire chassis on the dead axle pivot right here in the center of the drive sprocket. If your equalizer spring and links are either damaged or missing and you get into pull, like on an uphill maneuver, it's been known for these to rear up, pivot completely around backwards on that dead axle, and whomever happens to be in the seat at the time does not have a good day at all. So we'll get this cotter pin pulled out here. Now we can let the tension off, or the pressure off of the spring, allow that to drop. Pin removed from the other side. Now we can pull that equalizer spring right out. And if you're going to be doing any work on the engine at all, like taking the oil pan off, you should look at freeing up these pin brackets right now, because they go through the pan and through the block, and everything is nice and solid. This is the time to be heating and beating on them. And I say that because we're going to need to. It's pretty common for that long stud portion to rust into the engine block. So what I do is pull the lock washer out from under the nut. Take the nut completely off, washer off, and then thread the nut back on the top so we can put a large piece of brass up there and strike down on it. Taking that lock washer out gives you some distance. You can actually drive that down. So we'll apply some heat, see if we can get that to move. We are moving it. I can see about an 1/8 inch gap down there. All right, obviously those won't come all the way out as long as the mainspring is in, but we've got that moving fairly well. So we know we can get it out when we need to. We'll do all the same steps to the one on the other side, and then we'll move on. And now we work on down to these stuck pins and sleeves. These, of course, cage the mainspring in so that it cannot rise up out of these saddles. It also helps to keep the front ends of these things secured down. But these are the stuck components that I decided it was worth splitting the tracks and taking all that stuff off the top of the frames just to access better. And it looks like we're even going to need heat to get the split pins out. So yeah, cotter pin on this end. Pin goes through the saddle, through this sleeve with another split pin or cotter pin, depending on where you live, on the other side. So let's work on getting all this freed up. There, we got it. Still solid. There, we got it to pop. All right. Repeat on the other side. And just like that, it's the following morning. When I was recording the pin removal on the other side, it was rather late in the evening yesterday. So after I turned the camera off, I moved over here and I heated the sleeve on this side, red hot, nothing. So I just walked away from it, let those parts cool all night, came back this morning, heated that sleeve one more time, and we were able to get that apart. And it took so much effort on these stuck pins. It's a good thing that we just made the decision a couple episodes back to split track and take everything off of these frames to gain access to that area, because if we hadn't, we would just fought through that small opening for hours and hours, and then would have been doing all that work right now anyway to dig back down and accomplish what we did prior. So sometimes it pays just to bite the bullet, dive right into something, make yourself plenty of room. So we have everything disconnected from the mainspring, so we are ready to pull. That means we'll be jacking the engine up next. And to help with that, I've made this jacking plate. It's just a piece of C-channel that's wide enough to cradle the top portion of the jack that I will be using. And we will attach it with these center 2 mounting holes that are on the front edge of the pan. And got a couple grade 8 bolts here, 7/8 thread pitch. Plenty long with a nut run down to the bottom of the threads. These will also act as limiters side to side for the top of that jack. So we should be pretty well caged in and nothing can slip. Just take note, I have the brake pedals ratchet strapped down pretty tight, so brakes are pretty well applied in case this wants to just stand up on the drive sprockets at the back. So also, I can confirm this is not as heavy as a bare rock crusher frame. It's still heavy, but I've moved a lot worse. It's a good time to get those link brackets out of our way. And just like that, rain delay. I think we're gonna have to cover up. giving ourselves a little emergency crossbar insurance in case this thing decides to hatch a plan with gravity and rock and roll. Well, it'll catch it. It'll put a nice artistic bend in this heavy square tubing, but it won't let it hit the ground. I'll give you all a better view of why we have to raise the fronts of these cats so high to clear that mainspring. The tops of those two main U-bolts fit into recesses that are cast into the oil pan, and then we have like that big gusset right there that kind of goes between them. There's another gusset back there on the bell housing flange, so it has to raise quite a bit to get that out, and I think I've just got enough. So I'm going to attempt a lift and a pull with the chain hoist. I expect to be dropping off of that track frame over there shortly. Yep. Now we build the engine stand. And because the top crossbar of my engine stand will go where the mainspring perch is, I took all the bottom bell housing bolts out because once that crossbar is in there, it'd make it awfully tight working to get at those. And the Eagle has landed. And as I said during the engine stand fabrication phase, we will drill for the front legs here now that we know where this whole front support ended up. There, leg bolts in. Just a couple of things left before we finish our engine stand install. These are some large 1-inch diameter bolts, and they fit very well down through where those shackle brackets go through the pan and the engine block. So what I'm going to do, one for each side, throw that 1-inch bolt through, and then we'll run this nut up the bottom. And what that does, it cinches the end of that bolt. Oh, we're getting our stand dirty. Look at that. It cinches the end of that bolt down onto this support bar of the engine stand. So that's going to give us a little bit more stability over what just that spring perch would afford. Got the one put in the other side already, right here. I think that was just a quick little mod that was well worth doing. And finally, oh, come on, you. You knew that camera was on, didn't you? And finally, leg bolt and a couple of pull hook brackets that Senior had made up for a project in the past. I figured they would fit on there really handy. You can hook a chain on that one, hook a chain on that one, and that gives you something to pull. So, all right, engine stand is fully assembled. We move on to the next. All right, we need to take this square cover off to determine what style main clutch we have in this tractor. This should have the thermoid link style clutch, in which case there's some disassembly that has to be done inside the bell housing before we can detach the engine from the chassis. So we need to find out. While I take the bolts out, I'll tell you a little more about the two different styles of clutches these tractors could have had. So serial number 2H1 to 2H3712 all used the thermoid link style main clutch, and those consisted of large pins that stuck out the back of the diesel engine flywheel that held onto laminated sections of belting, is the best way I could describe them, which Caterpillar called a thermoid link. So that allowed the flywheel to carry the main clutch around with it, yet the main clutch was not directly connected to it. All right, it kind of floated in there. So at tractor number 2H3713, they deleted the pegs on the back of the flywheel and they deleted the thermoid links and went to an adapter ring that bolted onto the back of the flywheel, which housed an external tooth type friction disc or center clutch disc, which was basically an upscaled version of the clutch disc that was used on the D2 and D4 tractors. So if it's still the old thermoid link style clutch like this one is supposed to have, we'll have to take some things apart. If it's been updated to the non-thermoid link style clutch, then we just unbolt the engine and it all slides apart. So we'll have a look in here. It's the usual black, okay? Get you all off of the tripod, and yes, this is the thermoid link style clutch. There is that laminated section of belting. That's one of the main flywheel pins right there. A couple metal links join it to the pressure plate. Very black in there. All right, so that means we probably won't be pulling this engine today because we need to do some disassembly of those links. And you can manage that through this opening, but you're going to be enjoying life a lot more if you pull this whole top cover off. So I think that's what I'm going to do next. That will also let us have a really good look at everything else that's in this back end. So I'm excited. Let's get that thing opened up. I have to get this PTO engagement lever off the shaft. Boy, it was dry on there. Yeah, the other end of the rod just hooks right there. We had to get that out of our way. Now we have covers. These two dome top round cap covers. That is where you access a lot of dead beetle bugs, and the brake shoe adjusters. All right, see when we move that brake pedal, that plunges in and out. Yep, so that's all connected. Here's something I noticed. We've got that Civilian Conservation Corps dark forest green on the inside of both of those covers, and you even see some overspray here. This had to have been majorly overhauled by the CCC at one point. So we've got this top cover here. You access that to adjust steering clutches, 10 bolts, and that'll come off. All right, have a look down in. Yeah, it's dirty in there, about what I expected. And over here, 4 bolts. Here's another access cover to brakes, brake bands and brake linkages. Look at this. More of that dark forest green on the inside of that cover. Huh, they did a lot of painting on this thing. They were into a lot of things for sure. And we'll pop this other cover over here. There we go. Oh, and some critter's home. All right, he's about to have a bad day. Pull this cotter pin or split pin, depending on your part of the world. All right. That releases the tension from that return spring at the top of the brake band adjustment rod. Now on this other side, the cotter nail or split nail, depending on your part of the world. We'll pull this. The cotter nails are especially tough to get out. There we go, and that one went flying. That's okay, it landed right in the bolt bucket, so that's just a bonus. Now, these steering levers and all of their mechanisms would lift with this top cover, but I'm taking these steering levers off to protect them. So that means we need to undo these acorn nuts back here on these steering lever pivots. So this side we have some cotter heavy gauge wire or split heavy gauge wire. And here is one leg of a cotter pin or split pin here. Those pulled. Now we can take these acorn nuts off of the pull rods. All right, pull that forward out of the lever, pull this forward out of the lever, and with the 6 base bolts out, we should be able to pull both steering levers and their socket plates. Yep, there we are. And I see more mouse nesting up in the top. Ugh. Main clutch lever and linkage now. Cotter pin comes out down here, and that lever works off the shaft. And then I think it should be a pinch bolt up here because it was a fine thread that I loosened and pulled out of there. There we are. But it had no nut, and Cat never uses fine thread inside of casting, so I'm pretty sure that's not the right bolt. But that lever pulls off, and then all 3 pieces come right off. Shifter lever, let's pull that off as well. One less thing to be in our way. So 4 bolts around the perimeter of the tin base. Then you go up here and you pull the cotter pin or split pin, or in this case, the equivalent from above that collar. It's spring loaded, but it won't go too far. All right. So we got the collar, the spring, and the top dome. And then we have your tin housing. That comes off. There we are. And now we find 4 more bolts down there that have to be taken off of that top ball pivot plate. And with those 4 bolts taken out, we can pull the whole shifter right out. Surprisingly, that end does not look bad for wear. That's a shocker. Up here toward the front of the bell housing now, we've got these 2 bolts, one right here, one right here. They hold this linkage and the engagement lever for the pinion sleeve. So we can take that out. That thing looks like it's all brass. Look at that. That's kind of neat. All right. Yeah. And the last of the takeoffs, this is behind the footplate area. There's the brake pedal, of course. We have, Caterpillar calls this a nut, but it's supposed to have a flip top oil cup at the upper end of it. This one's rusted off. That U-shaped piece of metal is a guard so that your foot doesn't damage it. And this sleeve that they call a nut just threads into the top housing here, and it slides into a flexible coupling hose that would direct any oil you put in there down into the release bearings. We will see those hoses better once we get into that back end. So here's the other side. And a 3/4 wrench fits those. These are a bit rusted, but it still got the job done. And as long as we're talking about the oiling department, let's take this oil cup for the main clutch release bearing. All right, it's actually a pretty good cup. Has some media inside yet. Good flip top. All right, so now we begin work on all the perimeter bolts, and there are a lot of them. They go all the way around. All right, 37 of these 1/2-inch top cover bolts cracked loose. One of them is stuck, and it's a bit rusted on the head, so I had to discard the 3/4 socket, and I pounded an 18mm on. That tightened up pretty well. Just work it a little bit. Ooh, I don't know. Let me give it a little heat. It's most likely stuck where it goes through the hole in the top cover. That's where most of the rust seems to be on the rest of these, so that's why I gave the head of it plenty of heat, but I can hear a lot of crackling going on the inside. Look at that. Look at that. Cat bolts. What can I say? They're the best. There, we have it loose. 38 bolts around the base perimeter, and we have another 9 that I took out at the bell housing, but all the lifting rings are attached. 2 points here, 2 points back here. We'll pull it straight up with the tractor. Do a real easy lift. Yeah. You're clear of everything right now. Well, here's our first look inside the big back end. There's the right side steering clutch with brake band, left side steering clutch with brake band. The bevel gear is beneath this crown cover, saddle cover. Working forward from that, transmission. I don't see any missing gear teeth. Nothing in here really scares me as of yet, so that's good. There is a bit of a surprise up here in the clutch compartment, though. I thought when I looked in through that cover, the thermoid links were in backwards, and sure enough, now that we get a good view, these thermoids are in backwards. We have the engine pushing the clutch, pushing the thermoids. They should be pulling the clutch, all right? So here's the peg, one of the big pins that threads into the flywheel, 5 of them total. And then you have the thermoid link, and then that brackets onto these 2 brackets here. And here you have a bolt with a nut and fold-over locks on each side. All of that should be on the opposite side of that pin. So somebody has put this in backwards. Actually, every Caterpillar tractor model that has thermoid clutch links needs to be pulling on the thermoid with the engine pulling the clutch, except for certain models of 2U series D8. Caterpillar released a service bulletin to flip the thermoids around, turn them into a pusher setup like this, because in that application, they would last longer. In this RD-6, all of that should be on the other side of the pin. We should be pulling the links, not pushing them. So somebody put this center plate in backwards at one point in time, or they had a thermoid failure and they thought, let's make it push because we have more material in the middle than we do out here. Either way, we'll probably have to remedy that when we go back together. But to take these apart, the thermoid link pack itself will just slide off of every one of the flywheel pins. There's 5 total. And then we'll take the bolts, nuts, fold over locks here. I'm going to take the brackets with the thermoids completely out. Oh man, are these some bad fold over locks. Oh boy. Oh boy. Ay, ay, ay. And I misspoke earlier. There should be a cotter pin with a washer on the end of each of these studs. Those have been missing. And there we are. Actually, as a thermoid link goes, I've seen a lot worse. These do have quite a few hours service left in them. Yeah, there's the cross drilling where that cotter pin should be. These have spread a little bit because they weren't caged in, but they are usable yet. Roll it over, do the next. And now that I have all the thermoid links off, you can see the clutch and pressure plate just float. And looking way down in there, you will see, yep, there it is, the nut that holds the clutch assembly onto the input shaft, and that's where the input shaft stops. There is no pilot bearing that supports the input shaft in these flywheels. The thermoid links are what provide most of the support for your clutch. Interesting fact though, this center section of the clutch has a flat roller style input type bearing down on the input shaft just to center it because there's so much mass. So we have disconnected everything that we needed to with the clutch. As long as we have the top cover off, I'm going to pull this saddle because I want to get a good look at the bevel gear that's in there. Oh yeah, drop it in the dirt. Always a solid plan. Always a solid plan. Well, no rust. That's a good thing. Plenty of thick oil. There's the drive coupling and the input for the 540 PTO drive. It's on the back, but we see some spalling on those gear teeth on the bevel, and on the drive side we get just a little bit of metal that's starting to form a little sharp ridge. It's starting to wear. It's displacing metal. It's spalling. Oh yeah, look down here in the light. I can see a lot of wear pattern contour. So the gear set in the back end back here is pretty well worn out. Probably the original gear set to this tractor, so hopefully the parts unit has a better one. I don't know. All right, we had our look around in here. I'm going to throw that saddle cover back on. I could leave that off. Why not? I'm going to throw that top cover there back on just to keep bugs and critters and whatever else out of here. It's easy to pick back off. But all right, I think we just about have an episode. And there we are, buttoned back up. Throw the cover back on, and we're ready to call it a day. I like how that engine stand looks under there. That should function just fine. So next time, finally, we are ready just to pull the last few bolts, block up the rear end case under the bell, and we will see if we can skid this engine right off the front. Everything's disconnected in there and otherwise ready to go. So it was a lot of legwork today. I'd kind of hoped to get that engine pulled in this episode, but lengthwise we're it's hot out, forgive me. We're running up against it. So I'll let you all go for now. I hope you all enjoyed this episode, and I hope to see you back on the next one. We'll see if we can split it in half.